There exists a small, unassuming object discovered beneath the scorching land of Iraq. A humble clay jar, weathered, simple, seemingly insignificant. And yet, for a number of researchers, this object might be evidence of something so radical that it demands the rewriting of human history itself. It suggests that ancient civilizations, over 2 millennia ago, may have grasped a form of technology we thought belonged exclusively to the modern era: electricity. The Babylonians, a flourishing civilization nestled in the land of Mesopotamia, might have discovered a way to harness electrical energy far earlier than anyone could have imagined. At the center of this extraordinary story lies what is now known as the Baghdad Battery, an archaeological artifact that, despite being unearthed nearly a century ago, continues to spark fierce debates over its true nature and intended use. The story begins in 1938. During an excavation at Kujut Rabu, near today's Baghdad, German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig discovered a peculiar object buried beneath layers of ancient earth. It was a small clay pot, about 13 centimeters tall, cylindrical in shape. Inside this pot was a copper tube, sealed with a substance resembling bitumen or natural resin. And within the copper tube was a corroded iron rod. What astonished Koenig and many subsequent researchers was not simply the physical structure of the jar, but the deliberate arrangement of its internal components. They bore no resemblance to any known ritual object or domestic tool from Babylonian culture. Instead, it closely resembled a primitive galvanic cell, a rudimentary battery. If a mild acidic solution, such as vinegar or lemon juice, were poured into the jar, a substance entirely plausible in that era, it could produce a weak electric current. And this is no idle speculation. In the decades following Koenig's discovery, numerous scientists and engineers have recreated functioning models of the Baghdad Battery and confirmed that it can generate a voltage between 0.5 and 1.1 volts, equivalent to the humble lemon battery that school children experiment with in basic science classes today. So, what are we looking at here? How could an ancient civilization, separated from us by over 2,000 years, have created a device capable of producing electricity? This question has ignited imaginations, inspired skepticism, and provoked decades of scholarly debate. If the Baghdad Battery is indeed a genuine electrochemical device, then it stands to overturn everything we thought we knew about the trajectory of human technological development. Up until now, we've believed that electricity only came under human control in the 18th century, beginning with Benjamin Franklin's experiments, followed by Alessandro Volta's invention of the first true battery in 1800. Is it possible that the Babylonians, who built cities along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, had already understood a fraction of the principles of electrochemistry? To understand this mystery, we must delve into the construction of the object. The Baghdad Battery is composed of 3 basic parts: a clay vessel, a copper cylinder, and a second metallic element, usually iron, placed inside the copper. The gap between these metals could have been filled with a conductive solution such as acetic acid from vinegar or citric acid from fruit juice. When 2 dissimilar metals are immersed in an acidic solution, an electrochemical reaction occurs, and the difference in potential between the metals produces an electric current. This is the basic principle behind all chemical batteries, and the Baghdad Battery has all the necessary components to operate as one. Experimental reconstructions have shown that with just a few such vessels connected in series, one could light up a small LED bulb or generate a mild tingling sensation upon touch. Entirely plausible if the purpose was to impress participants in ancient religious rituals. But was this battery truly used to generate electricity? And if so, what was that electricity for? This is where the theories begin to diverge. Some surprisingly plausible, others wrapped in layers of historical mystery. The most popular theory suggests that the Baghdad Battery was used for electroplating. When electrical current is passed through a solution containing metal ions, it can cause those ions to deposit onto another object, effectively plating it, just as we electroplate gold or silver today. This theory gains traction when one considers several Mesopotamian jewelry artifacts that possess extremely thin and even metallic coatings, appearing almost as if they were made with modern techniques, rather than crude manual tools. If the Babylonians had indeed developed electroplating technology, it would imply a level of technical sophistication far beyond what we previously believed. However, not everyone agrees with this idea. Some traditional archaeologists entirely dismiss the notion of an ancient battery, arguing that the structure of the Baghdad Battery is nothing more than a coincidence. According to them, it might have simply been a storage container for papyrus scrolls or some rolled metal objects, sealed with resin, nothing to do with electricity at all. These critics also point out that there is no written record from Babylonian civilization or any nearby culture of the era that mentions electricity, batteries, or anything even remotely similar. If this had truly been a widely used technology, surely we would have found wires, conductive elements, or some form of written instruction. Yet none have ever been uncovered. This absence of supporting evidence has led many scholars to doubt the battery theory altogether. But proponents counter with an equally compelling argument. The absence of written documentation is precisely what makes the artifact more intriguing. If it were just a mundane household object, why was it constructed with such deliberate design? Why does it involve two dissimilar metals, carefully separated by a non-conductive seal? Why does the arrangement so closely mimic the structure of a modern galvanic cell? Perhaps we are simply too accustomed to interpreting the past through the lens of the present, assuming that if a technology wasn't documented, it must never have existed. Furthermore, the Baghdad Battery is not an isolated anomaly. Around the world, other ancient structures and artifacts have raised similar questions about whether our ancestors might have had access to forms of energy or knowledge now lost. A famous example is the Dendera light in Egypt, a bas-relief found in the Temple of Hathor that seems to depict a giant light bulb, complete with what looks like a filament inside, and a figure holding what could be interpreted as an electrical device. While mainstream archaeology insists this is simply symbolic art, others believe it hints at forgotten ancient technologies. Returning to the Baghdad Battery, there's another, less conventional theory worth considering, that the device was used in religious ceremonies to produce a sense of divine contact. A slight electric shock could have been interpreted by ancient people as a physical touch from the gods. Imagine a priest standing in the shadows of a temple, operating a hidden device that causes a tingling sensation when touched. To the uninitiated, it would have felt like sacred energy, proof of a spiritual presence. In a society where science had not yet been codified, any unusual physical sensation could easily be seen as something magical or divine. But if we entertain the idea that the Baghdad Battery was used for ceremonial purposes, we then face a deeper question. Who created it? And why have so few examples been found? Why isn't there a whole chain of similar devices or a broader technological ecosystem? This is where the lines blur between theory and myth, between archaeological evidence and speculative imagination. Perhaps the battery was the product of a specific group of individuals who possessed a rare and secret knowledge that vanished shortly after they did. Or maybe it was a form of technological art created for one unique ritual purpose, then buried and forgotten with the sands of time. There's another perspective supported by some modern engineers and alternative historians that we have long underestimated the intellectual capabilities of ancient civilizations. Babylon, like Egypt, the Indus Valley, the Maya, or ancient China, achieved remarkable feats of mathematics, astronomy, architecture, timekeeping, legal systems, and religious philosophy. So why is it so hard to believe that they may have stumbled upon, or even systematically explored, the principles of electricity, even in a primitive form? To be fair, skepticism is not without merit. From a scientific standpoint, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And with the Baghdad Battery, we are still left with only a handful of fragmented artifacts, most of them incomplete, and no textual record describing how they were made or used. Reconstructions of these batteries remain theoretical, and to this day, there is no definitive proof that the Babylonians actually employed them in any practical or ritualistic context. This is precisely why the debate continues. Was the Baghdad Battery truly a piece of ancient electrical technology, or simply a misunderstood object repurposed by modern minds, hungry for mystery? From a psychological and anthropological perspective, another reflection arises. Perhaps we, the modern humans, are simply too eager to find evidence that our ancestors were more advanced than we currently assume. Maybe we want to believe that once upon a time, humanity had reached great technological heights, only to lose them in the floods of history. Perhaps we need to believe that these ancient forms of knowledge still lie dormant, waiting to be rediscovered, if only we are humble enough to listen. In this sense, the Baghdad Battery becomes more than just an archaeological artifact. It transforms into a symbol of collective imagination, of humanity's yearning to reconnect with its intellectual ancestry through a long-forgotten thread of wisdom. And yet, curiosity remains an unstoppable fire in the world of academia. In numerous international symposia on ancient technology, the Baghdad Battery is routinely cited as one of the most controversial artifacts, where science, archaeology, engineering, and theology collide. Some engineers have taken the theory even further, connecting multiple Baghdad-style batteries in series to create stronger currents. Experimental reconstructions in Germany and the US have shown that linking 4 to 5 of these clay jars can produce a voltage comparable to that of a modern AA battery. While this would not be enough to power large machinery, it could absolutely suffice to trigger electrochemical reactions, such as plating gold onto silver jewelry. In fact, one group of researchers has proposed that these batteries may have been used for biological or therapeutic effects, such as healing. In ancient Eastern medicine, electroacupuncture and electrical nerve stimulation have long histories. Could it be that the Babylonians also experimented with weak electric currents to stimulate nerves, relieve pain, or promote healing? The idea is not far-fetched, especially when one considers how intertwined ancient medicine often was with ritual and mysticism. A gentle electric shock might well have been perceived as a form of divine intervention. A healing touch, not just to the body, but to the spirit. Still, due to the scarcity of surviving artifacts, every theory faces ambiguity. Perhaps these devices were once widespread, but their fragile materials didn't survive the ravages of time. Perhaps they were tools of an elite priesthood, used only in sacred spaces, deliberately kept out of everyday records. Or perhaps they were not of Babylonian origin at all, but relics of an even earlier civilization, passing briefly through Mesopotamia like a whisper, only to vanish again, unrecognized and unrecorded. Some have even put forth a bolder hypothesis, that the Baghdad Battery is a remnant of a lost super-civilization predating Babylon itself. Perhaps it is a leftover fragment from a post-Atlantean society, or from an entirely forgotten culture wiped out by some cataclysmic event. Though this idea ventures into the realm of alternative history, it continues to attract many who believe that human civilization has experienced multiple cycles of rise and fall, and that what we find today are merely scattered puzzle pieces from a grand mosaic we no longer remember how to assemble. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is clear: the Baghdad Battery forces us to rethink how we perceive history. History is not a clean, linear path from ignorance to enlightenment. It is a layered tapestry where great knowledge can be discovered, forgotten, and rediscovered again. And within that tapestry, each strange artifact, each enigma like the Baghdad Battery, is not merely a curiosity, but a question mark, a pause, a moment that challenges us to remain endlessly inquisitive. The past is not static. It breathes, moves, and occasionally shocks us into awareness. We live in an age that prides itself on knowing too much. Yet artifacts like this remind us that in truth, we still know very little. A single clay jar, buried among broken pottery in the deserts of Iraq, might carry within it an entire universe of forgotten knowledge. We may argue, we may dismiss, we may test theories, but we cannot fully extinguish the question: if the Babylonians truly knew how to generate electricity, then what did they use it for? And why was it lost? If we closely examine the way modern people react to the Baghdad Battery, we can see something intriguing. The debate surrounding this small object is not merely a clash of scientific theories. It is a collision of worldviews. On one side is the belief in a linear progressive timeline, where technology evolves steadily upward, from primitive to advanced, without deviation. On the other side is the cyclical perspective that humanity has passed through golden ages, suffered cataclysms, and begun again from the ashes. To those who believe in linear progress, the Baghdad Battery is impossible, an anachronism, out of place and out of time. But for those who consider history to be a series of forgotten cycles, it might be evidence that great knowledge once existed, flared brightly, and then vanished like a lone flame in the night. And indeed, human history has not always moved forward in a straight line. Knowledge has been lost before. When the Roman Empire collapsed, Europe plunged into centuries of darkness, during which much ancient wisdom was erased. When the Library of Alexandria, arguably the greatest storehouse of knowledge in the ancient world, burned to the ground, perhaps thousands of revolutionary works disappeared forever. We do not know how much we've lost. We only know that much of it will never return. So, is it really so strange to imagine that the Babylonians once discovered a physical phenomenon that, for whatever reason, was never passed on? Within this context, the Baghdad Battery is no longer just a strange object. It becomes a symbol of forgotten knowledge, a quiet reminder that even in our modern age of satellites and algorithms, we remain blind in the vast corridors of our own past. We think we stand on the shoulders of giants, but perhaps the giants fell long ago. And what remains are only their rusted fragments, scattered in museum drawers, dusty storerooms, or beneath the sand. Fragments like a corroded jar in the desert that might contain a forgotten chapter of human understanding. This is why the debate over the Baghdad Battery is not really about materials or electricity. It is about something deeper. How much do we truly know about our past? How much of what we call history is actually interpretation? Assumptions built on missing pieces? And is our modern pride in progress really justified? Or are we simply another point in a long, repeating cycle of knowledge gained and knowledge lost? Modern science, for all its power, has one critical limitation. It only accepts what can be measured, repeated, and verified. But history is not a laboratory. It is a painting half-burned, with missing strokes and faded colors. When we find something like the Baghdad Battery, it does not come with a user manual. It comes only with questions, and sometimes questions are more valuable than answers. This does not mean we must fall into conspiracy theories or fantastical speculation. But neither should we reject possibilities simply because they do not fit our current model. What we need most is a spirit of open curiosity, the true essence of science. We may doubt, but we must not become arrogant. We may challenge, but we should not immediately dismiss. If even a humble clay pot might conceal a technology we thought belonged only to the 18th century, then perhaps it says more about the limits of our own imagination than it does about the ingenuity of our ancestors. And when we widen the frame, placing the Baghdad Battery beside the Egyptian pyramids, the megaliths of Puma Punku, or the celestial observatories of the Maya, we begin to see that the ancient world was not merely primitive. It may represent a different chapter of human civilization altogether, a different story, a different intelligence, but one still driven by the same hunger to understand the universe, to grasp the invisible forces behind existence, to touch the divine. Perhaps the Baghdad Battery is not a battery at all. Perhaps it was just a container. Perhaps all the electrical theories are simply projections, romantic attempts to glorify the past. But even if that's true, it has fulfilled a critical purpose. It made us ask the question. And any artifact that compels humanity to pause, reflect, and re-examine what it thought it knew, that is a treasure beyond measure. So let us suppose, just suppose, that these jars really were ancient batteries. Then we must ask another question. Where did the Babylonians learn to build them? Was it a random discovery? Or was the knowledge passed down from an older source? Are their civilizations deeper, older, more advanced than we remember, lost entirely to time? This is not a conspiracy theory. This is an unexplored possibility. And in the world of knowledge, the most dangerous thing is not an unanswered question. It is a question that no one dares to ask. Therefore, in closing, I offer no definitive conclusion. I am not here to tell you that the Baghdad Battery is absolutely a power source, nor am I here to deny it. I am only here to invite you to wonder. What if it were true? What else might the ancients have known that we have forgotten? And if that question can shake our view of history, then this humble jar, even if it never produced a volt of electricity, still contains a spark. The spark of curiosity, the spark of rediscovery. And sometimes, a single spark is enough to reignite an entire journey back into the wisdom we once lost.